Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad Tehami. Every year, the U.S. State Department takes a review of the kind of level of religious freedom in each foreign country across the globe, and then on the basis of that particular review, it releases a report. And based on what sort of religious violations are happening in a certain specific country, it either designates a country into the list of countries of particular concern or the special watch list. Now, in the latest report, the State Department has once again spared India, and it hasn't included India in this particular list of countries of particular concern. Now, according to the press statement, the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken, while announcing the names of those countries which have been designated in this particular list of countries of particular concern, has said, let me quote him, that advancing the freedom of religion or belief has been a core objective of U.S. foreign policy ever since Congress passed and enacted the International Religious Freedom Act in 1998, unquote. At the same time, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is also a Congress-mandated bipartisan body, which also releases its separate report regarding the level of religious freedom and the level of religious violations happening in a certain specific country. It also makes recommendations to the State Department as to which country should be added into the countries of a particular concern list. Now, it has expressed extreme disappointment over State Department's continuous failure of not designating India as a country of particular concern, and has called for a congressional hearing into this particular matter. Now, the Commission's chair, Abraham Cooper, and Vice Chair Frederick A. Davey, in a joint statement, have said that the Commission rejects the State Department's decision to omit India's designation. The joint statement also says, in India, in addition to perpetrating egregious religious freedom violations within its borders, the government has increased its transnational repression activities targeting religious minorities abroad and those advocating on their behalf. Likewise, there has been a deep concern that has been expressed by Pakistan's Foreign Office, which has said India, the biggest and serial violator of religious freedom, has once again been excluded from the U.S. State Department's designation list. This is despite the clear recommendation by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, as well as public concerns raised by international human rights constituencies about India's maltreatment of the religious minorities. We'll be taking up for discussion this important matter, why the State Department actually once again omitted the name of India from this particular list of countries of particular concern, despite the recommendation by the bipartisan body, which is also mandated by the Congress, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Do these two bodies have a different understanding of the foreign policy objective of the U.S. also? And under what authority the U.S. State Department basically releases such reports, and to what effect these reports are released? We'll be taking all these matters up for discussion. In the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Awais Bin Wasi. He is expert Indian affairs and Kashmir affairs, of course. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. In the studio, we are also honored to have been joined by Barrister Nida Salam Chaudhry, human rights activist. Barrister Nida, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. At the same time, on Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Jamil Khan, his former ambassador. Dr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. If both of you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan, now specifically talking about this particular list of countries of particular concern, could you shed a little bit of light what this particular list actually is, and what does it tell us, and what does it actually depict about the religious freedom or the religious violations happening in any foreign country that the U.S. reviews annually?
Well, this commission is formed under an act of the United States, and the Commission on International Religious Freedom, they issue on merit all the contents of the report, and based on their survey, based on various informations they gather. Now, then subsequently it's released by the State Department. Now, was to the extent that the commission, once they write their report, they try and restrict themselves within the framework of whatever they find. Mostly, it is not really impacted and affected by the geopolitical um, uh, uh, situations of the world. But once it comes to the State Department, then they have the other considerations, and such as their allies, such as the geopolitical consideration. India uh, somehow has become a very important country in their foreign policy of the containment of China. Now, India has been ignoring all the international law in once it comes to Kashmir, once it comes to religious minority and their rights, their own citizen for that matter, Indian citizen. So they've been ignoring all those their own as well as their international. What are those international law? They've been really violating very seriously, and still they could get scot-free so far as the State Department is concerned. Because if the State
Right, Dr.
Department
Khan, your
endorses
point is well
the
taken. Now,
report,
I'm curious to understand what actually gives the mandate to the State Departments to, designate the countries in certain specific categories and certain lists. You already mentioned there is a law that was passed by Congress that actually gives the mandate to the State Department, also the International Religious Freedom Act. Now, when we talk about this particular act, it is of course at the national level in the United States of America. What does international law say about a certain specific country passing a certain law at the national level, and on the basis of it, it designates the foreign countries into certain categories? Where do we understand this particular practice actually stands as per the international law and norms?
well, but normally they draw their strength from from some of the international covenant and some of the international laws, while they try and designate some of the countries as they have done it with Pakistan this time, ignoring India, which has been violating more seriously. They even the religious commission could not really cite any cogent evidence for whatever they've written. But coming back, what are the grounds under which the State Department is able to designate countries as such as what they have done with various countries, including Pakistan? And now those are basically the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, and freedom of opinion, again, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then UNGA Declaration is also 1981, I guess. And there are some other covenant of the international law in which they have very amply expressed about the freedom, religious freedom, and the rights of the religious minorities, and the
Right, Dr.
covenant of
Khan,
the
once
civil
again,
and
your point is well taken. It
political
is
rights.
also mentioned in that particular International Religious Freedom Act that is basically derived, or it takes its origin from various covenants of the international law, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Helsinki Accords, and the Declaration on the Elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion or belief. Now, based on these, when a certain particular law in a certain country that authorizes one of its key departments to categorize certain countries in certain lists derived from the international law and the international covenants. Now, don't you think there should be the more level of transparency and credibility associated with that process?
No, indeed, and then which is the forum to really further investigate about the credibility and about the reliability of the report and the way it is then announced by the State Department. There has to be some forum. If it is challenged by countries, like they have lamented, there are about more than half a dozen countries that they have brought into this very loop. If they challenge it, and the right forum for challenging it is the International Court of Justice, and there they can contest their case. Now, that is number one. Number two is that they can do their rebuttal of those countries, like our foreign office has already done that, but that would not be sufficient because the countries subsequently, what they might as well do is that the severe violation of religious freedom, as they have said it for various countries, including Pakistan. So what they can exercise the power of their own Treasury Department and Treasury laws, and there are other laws, and they can impose bilateral sanction. That's the extreme
Right.
measure which a country can take. Pakistan can impose a sanction on any other country so far as its own sphere is concerned, but that
Right.
would be applicable and implementable only bilaterally.
Bilateral.
Multilaterally, we have already discussed about the other international laws. So
Right.
the question is, if it is challenged, then obviously it will come in the debate of the world, and then
Right.
people
Dr.
would
Khan, your point is
start
well
getting
taken.
to know from it.
I'll request you to please stay with us. Let me proceed with the discussion. Dr. Wasi, now, when we talk about the two differing views coming from within the United States of America, State Department, not including India, once again, repeatedly, year after year, into the list of countries of particular concern, while at the same time, the other body, which is also mandated by the Congress, is continuously recommending. This time, they've expressed extreme disappointment as to the failure of the State Department of not including India into this particular list. So when we talk about the statements which have come forth by both of these bodies, Secretary Blinken, the State Department, as well as this commission, both of them deem ensuring the religious freedom around the globe as a core foreign policy objective of the US. Do we understand that these differing views by these both bodies lead us to understand that they have very different understanding, in fact, the entirely opposite understanding of the foreign policy of the US itself?
Yes, you're right that this dichotomy between the two institutions and the perspective taken by the two institutions, it seems self-contradictory. On the one hand, this commission that asks for designating India into the list of country of particular concern. But State Department, due to geopolitical considerations and other global, reasons, I think it is not including. So I think that if that is not ratified by that very organization, the track record of India with regard to minorities is so grim and so bleak. Perhaps it doesn't need any commission. It is so self-evident, because if you see the consistent pattern of the incidents, so you can see, for example, that Citizenship Act, Muslims have been excluded. 250 million Muslims, they have been living there. And Professor Noam Chomsky, in one of the interviews, he said that this is one of the largest persecuted minority. Lethal form of persecution is taking place in India. Agna Chatterjee from University of California, Indian citizen, and she is by and large having the same opinion. And similarly, many other intellectuals, many other thought leaders, they are of the same opinion. Similarly, if you see the conditions of the largest Muslims in India, their representation, for example. So you can also see that there is only one place or one organization or institution where they are duly represented, that is Indian jails.
But right. Dr. Wasi, I'll come back to you to have your detailed understanding as to why these two very key bodies, which both are mandated by the Congress as per that law, International Religious Freedom Act, why do they have differing views regarding certain specific country when specifically we talk about India? Barrister Nida, when we talk about the kind of egregious human rights violations which have been perpetrated by Indian authorities within India. Now, there is a list of those things which have been mentioned by this commission in its 2023 report, the legislation on that regard, as well as that enactment of the draconian laws and the kind of high-handed tactics against the religious minorities. Despite those facts, what do you think keeps the State Department of the United States of America oblivious to this particular fact?
As far as religious discrimination is concerned, I strongly believe that religious discrimination in India has been on the rise. The world's largest artificial democracy reached a frightening level of religious discrimination. People from different religious backgrounds are suffering on daily basis. For instance, Dalit community, Muslims, Sikh community. In 2022, religious freedom condition in India continued to exacerbate. Throughout the year 2022, the Indian government, under the umbrella of the Indian Prime Minister, at national, state and local level enforced religious discrimination policies through surveillance, harassment, detention, and under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and by targeting non-governmental organizations such as NGOs who were quite vocal about the violations of human rights and to protect human rights under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. I would like to add here the Karnataka state government banned on hijab in public school, and despite widespread protest, when the case went into the High Court, the state High Court upheld the government's decision and stated that banning on hijab is quite right, and hijab is not essential part of the Islamic practice. So I'm quite surprised on the decision of the state High Court. That I strongly believe that the court and the legal system is there to protect people, but unfortunately in India the situation is quite pathetic. How can we forget that young girl, Muskan Khan? Images went viral back in the days when she was heckled by the far-right Hindutva ideologists. So I would like to agree with the panelist in relation to the Citizenship Act in combination with the registration of national citizen. It is perceived as an attempt to disenfranchise Muslim of Indian citizenship. So
right, Minister Nida, you already mentioned the kind of the hijab ban that was imposed by the government authorities in Karnataka. Later on, when this particular case went into the concerned court, when we talk about that particular approach and the kind of an understanding of the people associated with the judicial system in the so-called largest democracy in India, as you have rightly pointed out, that it actually seconded what the authorities had done regarding imposing the hijab ban. Now, similar sort of high-handed measures on the part of the authorities there, as well as which are endorsed by the judiciary at all levels as well. So why the State Department, despite the recommendation by its own commission, does not include India into that list of countries of particular concern? What holds it back?
You know, I strongly believe that the way the Indian government and the Prime Minister pictured reality in a different manner, actually. And besides than that, the State Department should have considered all these concerns, and these concerns are quite relevant concerns from all perspectives, because the Indian current government and the Prime Minister failed to provide and protect the right of their citizens and called them parasites and foreign destructive ideologists. And unfortunately, I strongly believe that the Indian Prime Minister is providing political patronage and cover of bigotry from all perspectives.
Right, let me once again go to Dr. Jamil Khan. Dr. Jamil Khan, as you have already mentioned, there are certain countries which have the right to reject such type of reports. Of course, we have seen the kind of deep concern that has been raised by Pakistan's Foreign Office regarding omission of India from this particular list. It calls on that this conspicuous omission raises serious questions about the credibility, transparency and objectivity of the entire process. That was exactly the question I was trying to ask you earlier. When this particular exercise or the process is derived from the instruments of international law, does it naturally not call for more objectivity, more rigorous work and more transparency? Otherwise, if there are so many blatant human rights violations happening in a certain country which claims to be the largest democracy in the world and which has been repeatedly reported by international organizations, why the US State Department doesn't give any sort of a heed to those? And if it does not, even to the calls and alarms raised by its own commission, does it not actually raise some serious questions about the credibility and the transparency of the entire process?
No, indeed it does, and then United States, couldn't care less about it. Basically, if we take the example of what had happened while Security Council had vetoed or rejected the resolution while they were going to attack Iraq, or while they're going to really take action against Iraq at that time on the basis of weapon of mass destruction. What is happening in Gaza? The entire world is one side. 153 countries one side, and the United States and just a dozen or so countries on the other side. So that is the world opinion. But the problem is that implementation of certain international covenant and the mechanism is so tedious that sometimes the United States really can show their biases. And in this case, also, United States, Pakistan is saying fine enough. Pakistan has been, already lamented by them what they wanted to do by the State Department, But India was ignored their own. There were 75 Democrats, senators, and the members of the House. They had written a letter to Biden just a couple of months ago, while the previous report was published and while there was some violation was going on in India. And the Senator Chris Van, if I remember it correctly, he's the one who had written that letter on behalf of about 75 Democrats. And what was their demand? Their demand was to take India on task, in a nutshell. But nothing happened at that time also, because as I said, that the United States is keeping its China containment policy, and India somehow is one of the strongest allies in that context. So they're ignoring so many things. Not only this, on this count, but they're ignoring what had happened. Their own NGOs, the People's Organization, which is Indian-owned NGO, they indicated about 300 people in a mass grave at that time also.
As per that particular statement, the press statement by the State Department, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, says that significant violations of religious freedom also occur in countries that are not designated. Now, what does this particular statement mean?
No, basically, he might have relied on certain aspects of the report, but that means he's trying to just categorize these violations in his own terms, which has its political angle to it. And in that case, in certain countries, he says that they are less violated, and a certain country, according to his statement, is a more serious in terms of their concern is concerned. So that could be, I think, the reason, or he has not come up with an argument why he's doing so. But then definitely must have relied on something. And since it's not being challenged, so people would not get to know that what were the bases and what were the grounds, except for those bullet points which has been enunciated in the statement of Blinken. So one thing is for sure, that this kind of alleged allegations on certain countries, leaving the countries where the blatant violation with the United Nations report also says so, in the Secretary General's report. And the human rights, there are so many human rights activists. They've been making those statements as to what is happening to the religious freedom, and how the religious minorities are being persecuted of all kinds, whether it's Muslim or Christians or Dalit or any other minority. So nothing, this all being ignored by the world powers because of their own interest. Cow vigilantism is one of those very serious violation which has been directed towards the minorities, particularly Muslim, and it has been reported in at so many places, and even in the previous commission report, Religious Freedom Commission report. But again, that was ignored. So at least we have those evidence available with us in these reports and the reports of the United States Secretary General's report. But that should be sufficient. I think a demonstration of the fact that the United States has its own angle in view of its own geopolitical, say, goals, and plus its own foreign policy priorities, where they are giving concession to one country so much
So,
that
Dr.
the
Khan, do you
blatant
think this is
violation
the
is being
first time?
ignored.
This is the first time that such type of concessions are being given to a certain specific country, as you already mentioned in your first take, that these sort of reports are usually not affected by the geopolitical considerations. But this time around, as you've already mentioned also, that perhaps the United States of America is trying to go ahead further, more and more into containing China. So for that, it requires India more and more. So keeping those geopolitical considerations in view, is this the first time that these reports and its findings are being affected?
No, it's not the first time. In fact, the previous report also, or for that matter, once the report of the United Nations was published, and in that religious minorities were also indicated and mentioned, even at that time, the State Department totally ignored it. And that's what I was saying, that it's a demonstration of the biases for whatever reasons. If I have to analyze, I would say that it's basically because of their geopolitical interest in the region, and the China containment policy, and the activities and the utilization, I would say, of India, for that matter, against it. So that could be the basic reason. But then one side is the report which has been formulated by the Commission, right, in which they have, India was really highlighted. Even the previous report, and as I said, there are 75 congressmen and women. They had written a letter led by Chris, Senator Chris, but again that was ignored, and even their own Democrats were not really given any heed. And what they wanted that basically this intolerance by the Indians, and the press freedom, internet access, the targeting of the civil societies, targeting of the minorities, targeting of the journalists who are reporting these violations. All those things were mentioned in that report. But again, the previous report I'm talking about, I'm not talking about this report. But even at that time, 175 member of the Congress, they had written to Biden, their president, but again, nothing happened at that time. So that, as I said, is ample evidence in front of us to see that they ignore what is the world perception and how the world is monitoring, like how the world is monitoring Gaza, this conflict and war, and how the world is monitoring what is happening in Kashmir. But then they are not really much pushed about it, because they just want to push
understanding you have shared, Dr. Khan. Let me once again proceed to Dr. Wasi. Dr. Wasi has already highlighted by the kind of high-handed measures that are being perpetrated by Indian authorities, especially since the BJP came into power ever since in 2014, when specifically, as Barrister Nida was also mentioning earlier, the kind of hijab ban that was imposed in Karnataka. Now we understand that this particular authority that is ruling India since 2014, it is Hindutva driven, it is driven by the RSS ideology. What about the judicial system? Of course, if the rights of anybody or any community are being continuously violated, naturally it is going to look up to the judicial system for justice, for any sort of consolation, for any sort of respite. But we've seen repeated incidents happening, the high-handed incidents on the part of authorities happening on one side, and then rather than giving justice to the victims, the judiciary had been endorsing all those high-handed tactics, as well as the discriminatory measures towards those communities. So where do we understand the judicial system of the so-called largest democracy actually stands, Dr. Wasi?
You know, in India, what happens is that the established principles of democracy and constitutionalism and separation of power have been drastically undermined. And this separation of power, as you have been referring to the exercise of judicial power, it has not been exercising in India. The reason is quite simple and quite clear, that the narrative of Hindutva, the toxic construct of Hindutva has been permeated into all state organs, and judiciary is one of them. And we have seen the persistent patterns of the verdicts of the Indian Apex Court, whether it is the decision of this Babri Masjid demolition, Article 370, or some other cases in Samjhauta Express. People have been convicted, but later on they got relieved. So it means that judiciary has been in connivance with the executive to perpetuate and to advance the Hindutva agenda which BJP-led government is advancing in India.
Right. So when we talk about the State Department in particular, to take the cognizance if it releases report every year annually by reviewing the kind of religious violations happening in a certain specific country. Now, again, why are there any geopolitical considerations, as already mentioned by, highlighted by Dr. Khan, as to why the State Department continuously over the last many years, despite the recommendations by the Commission itself, hasn't been including India into it?
This is recommendations, as we have discussed earlier, that this policy of containment, this other geopolitical imperatives, geopolitical considerations, basically the recommendations are perhaps for the international consumption as far as US so-called ideas are concerned.
So when you talk about the recommendations given by the Commission itself,
yes,
recommendations so that's for the international consumption.
That
in
for
what
international
sense?
consumption means that these are the ideals which United States of America principally advocate. But
right.
When it comes to the practicality, when it comes to translate these things into action, so we see there is a contradiction.
But
for
there
example,
is a
there is a dual
statement, as
standard.
I've already mentioned.
This is not the recommendation which came in 2023. Since 2022, they have been consistently asking the United States authorities, Antony Blinken also, but
right.
there is a silence.
Right.
So it means that the geopolitical considerations, they are eclipsing the larger ideals and larger principles.
But now this particular joint statement with the chair and the vice chair of this particular commission says that we will not be deterred and will continue our role as a congressionally mandated watchdog to ensure the US government prioritizes religious freedom as a key component of its foreign policy. Now, as to what measures, you're of the view that it is for international consumption, but they are of the view that they are not going to be deterred and will continue their role to keep that very foreign policy objective which has been mandated to them as well by the Congress. So how do you think they can go about it?
No, it is it is encouraging that if they want to continue to highlight and they don't want to deter from these recommendations against the practices with regard to minorities. But I think that these things, until and unless these things have been materialized, until and unless India has been brought to the book, India has been designated to the concerned list. So this is a futile exercise. So I think that we need some tangible measures. We need the State Department and US administration, Biden's administration, should take some actionable, some measurable steps to translate these recommendations into reality, because the list is very far. For example, this is not specific to only one minority, all the minorities, whether they are Christian, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Dalits, whether they are other minorities, they all are persecuted.
Right. What sort of measures, I'll come back to you to take your detailed view regarding as to what measures could be taken that have been recommended by, again, the Commission. Now, Barrister Nida, now this Commission also recommends to impose targeted sanctions on the Indian government agencies and officials responsible for severe violations of religious freedom and freezing those individuals' assets and or barring their entry into the United States of America under human rights related financial and visa authorities. Do you think that is doable? Can it be done?
Well, it is doable, but it depends about the intentions. Like what are the real intentions behind that? I would like to add here in relation to that, violent acts were also perpetrated across India under the justification of cow protection. In August 2022, BJP member Gyan Dev Ahoja was recorded publicly calling for his listeners to kill anyone involved in cow and all that. Hindu nationalists bulldozed Catholic Church, and in addition to that, at least 4 madrasas, Islamic centers, were also demolished, and Chief Minister Assam stated that madrasas should be eliminated. Imagine the government officials' narrative in India and their vision in relation to religious freedom and discrimination. As far as sanctions you have referred, I strongly agree. The properties should be seized overseas, and I would like to add something very pivotal here. In 2005, the US State Department revoked Modi's visitor tourist or business visa on the grounds of his role in religious discrimination and communal violence in Gujarat, and he was given a title, a butcher of Gujarat, by the Western media, by the Western allies. So these are all relevant evidences. I think the Western world and organizations and the states should consider when it comes to the protection of human rights, when it comes to religious freedom, and when it comes to equality for other peoples to live their life on the grounds of equality and religious freedom.
Right, Dr. Khan, now when this commission says that they are not going to be deterred and they will continue their role as a congressionally mandated watchdog to ensure the US government prioritizes religious freedom as a key component of its foreign policy. Now, it has also recommended measures, the imposing of sanctions on the entities and the individuals who are involved in the severe religious violations in India. How is it doable? Is it at the very first place? If yes, what measures can be taken, especially when it comes to the role of this commission? Can it build up a pressure on the State Department first to include
the role of this commission is only a recommendatory role, nothing more than that. The implementing tool is the State Department and the Treasury Department once it comes to the financial sanctions. Once it comes to some other sanctions, then of course the State Department and the Pentagon. But I don't foresee that stage can ever come so far as India is concerned, at least in the near future.
You already mentioned that it can only make recommendations. Now, as per the provisions of the law, this particular law that actually mandates both of these bodies to have the review of the religious freedoms, it has also got the mandate of tracking the implementation by the US government of the recommendations made by this commission itself. So what do we understand of this provision?
Can pressurize commission is mandated to really keep pursuing and pressurizing its own implementing tool, and which is the government, which is the Biden administration or any administration for that matter. And what are those tools available with the administration to impose sanctions? It's a bilateral sanction. Bilateral sanction could be of any kind. Bilateral sanction could be the Treasury Department can impose a sanction of certain commodities export, sanction on certain aid, sanction on certain military aid or military sale of military armament. So there are various kind of sanctions which are visa regime sanction, the immigration sanction, the worker permit sanction. So there are so many, and then countries may impose sanctions for other diplomatic measures on countries that persistently violate religious freedom. And that is the implementing tool. The implementing tool is only the administration of, in this case, the US administration. So if the commission has the right and has the power to pursue and pressurize them, and then on the basis of that, the commission can also write it down direct to the congressmen and women to really take it up in the Congress and the House of Commons for the passing resolutions or passing the bill for sanctioning those countries who are violating these recommendations. Because the commission was formed and met for to uphold the principles of the freedom, the religious freedom and the human rights principles, of the United States. So once that is not achieved, the Commission can keep pursuing it. But once it comes to the principle, well, the principle, as the recent past has already shown, that it has not been really across the board. It has not been implemented across the board. It has been selectively used against certain countries and in favor of the other countries. So those are the things which we have seen in the past, and I think those are these things which is being witnessed in this case also, what we are discussing today.
Right. Right, Dr. Khan, now there are geopolitical considerations. There is a kind of discriminatory approach being meted out by the US State Department towards certain specific countries, including some of those into that particular list of countries of particular concern and omitting those which actually qualify by all the definitions to be there in that particular list of the countries of particular concern. We do understand they have the geopolitical interests and the geopolitical considerations when it comes to also the economic interests when it comes to India. What about the transnational repression? What about the transnational repression of those minorities? We've seen the cases, the June murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian national, on the Canadian soil. Very categorical accusations made on the basis of those evidence which the Canadian authorities say they do have. Then there was another case in December last year in 2023. We saw that the US authorities also thwarting an attempt of assassination on the US soil. Now, we also saw that US President Joe Biden was about to visit India and participate in the Republic Day celebrations, which he later on cancelled or postponed. Now, given these facts, we can for a moment understand that the United States doesn't consider the dignity of human beings within India on the basis of its economic and geopolitical interests from India. But what about the cases which have come forth on the Canadian soil as well as on the US soil? Shouldn't this time around the approach of the State Department had been different?
See how it has started diminishing, and that is by itself a clear evidence that the geopolitical consideration has overwhelmed the other considerations of the United States. Right now, this is such a serious thing that the transnational terrorism has taken place. And this and that has impacted and affected the sovereignty of the United States in this case and our Canadian sovereignty. But still, the sanctions has not been imposed. The least they could do it, if they could not take it up at the international forum, at least they could have done the bilateral sanctions. They did not do it. And that's why you can see that started diluting. And why it started diluting? Because they really feel that India, the significance of India in terms of containment of China, and of course their economic interests apart, but then their basic interest and the fundamental interest, the most important interest is the role of India in the containment of China. And that's why India is a member of Quad, and also it is supporting a cause. India is supporting a cause also in that, and India is a member of the String of Alliance. It's for these reasons that the United States is taking not only a lenient view, but it's looking the other way around. Right. And not really saying anything to India, despite the fact that its own congressman, 75 is not a small number, it's a large
involved in, no matter how many times India is found involved in transnational terrorism. Let me take this point to Dr. Wasi. Dr. Wasi, now despite getting to know that how Indian authorities and its officials have been involved in transnational terrorism, first on Canadian soil, and there was a plot that was thwarted by the US authorities on the US soil. And then we saw that postponement of the cancellation of Joe Biden's participation in Republic Day celebrations in India also. Now, ideally and naturally, shouldn't this time around State Department's approach should have been a little different?
Yes, yes. You know, these as this the Commission recommendation, I think that it has focused on what is taking place within Indian borders. But this phenomenon, as
it
you
is
have very
also
rightly
mentioned
pointed
that
out,
the government has
transnational.
increased its transnational repression activities targeting religious minorities abroad and those advocating on their behalf.
Exactly. So when we see the case of Hardeep Singh Najjar in Canadian soil, Canadian citizen with Indian origin, and the recent FBI chief's visit to New Delhi to discuss the case of a New York citizen, a Sikh activist. So that indicates that this trend, this alarming trend, is not confined to the within the borders of India, but it has become a transnational phenomenon, and it can endanger the peace of other countries also.
Right, Barrister Nida, your quick last comment. Shouldn't these instances of transnational terrorism in the recent past had served as an eye-opener, specifically when it comes to the approach of the State Department of the US?
It is, absolutely. In the beginning, Pakistan used to tell to the world that India is involved in sending the spies on our soil, to Afghanistan, to Iran and all that. And now, look at the Canada, look at the New York and all that. So I strongly believe that India should stop sending the spies in terms of destruction, destabilization of other countries, other states. And I would like to add here that India's constitution protects religious freedom. India, she's not ready to protect people's right as accordance of their own constitution, neither ready to fulfill the obligations of international commitments. So this United States Commission International Report on Religious Freedom is again an eye-opener for the world to consider. But again, I strongly believe that the Western world should pressurize India in terms of the protection of human rights, and there should be equality. If they prefer human rights to be protected on their land, it should be in the third world as well.
Barrister Nida Salam Chaudhry, human rights activist, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we're joined by Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, expert in Indian and Kashmir affairs. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show. And on Skype, we were joined by Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador. Dr. Khan, thank you very much once again for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.